The contraption I have next to me was invented by William Thomson, aka Lord Kelvin, and it's called the Kelvin Waterdropper or the Kelvin Thunderstorm. The upper half of the Waterdropper consists of two burettes that are going to be fed from a single bucket via these two siphon hoses, such that when I open up the burettes and the water flows out, it's going to be refilled by the 5-gallon bucket. The lower portion of the Kelvin Waterdropper consists of two metal buckets insulated from the ground and two copper rings insulated from the ground. And the copper rings are connected to the two buckets, except this copper ring is connected to this bucket and this copper ring is connected to this bucket. When I open up the two valves on the burettes, stream of water is going to flow through the copper rings and into the metal bucket, and we're going to observe what happens. If I zoom in on the two metal balls that are attached to each bucket, hopefully you can see that I'm generating a spark that jumps from one bucket to the other. You may also notice that there's a sound change of the water falling into the bucket that occurs just before there is an arc. Just before there's a spark, you'll notice that the stream of water falling into the bucket spreads itself apart, changing the tone that it makes when it hits the water. So, how does this work? Well, when we started, we liked to think that everything was neutral. But our bucket of water actually contains ions, molecules that have either lost or gained an electron. So, when we open up the two valves and streams of water fall into the bucket, some of these ions are also falling into the bucket. And what happens is eventually one of the buckets becomes slightly negatively charged, and the other one becomes slightly positively charged. Now, I don't know which bucket is going to be negative and which one's going to be positive, but what happens is this. When the stream of water falls into, let's call this the negative bucket, this bucket starts to get negatively charged, and it's connected to this ring over here, which then also becomes negatively charged. And the other bucket becomes slightly positively charged, and it's connected to this ring, which also becomes slightly positively charged. And what happens is, as the stream of water falls through this ring, the positively charged ring is going to attract negative ions into the bucket, and it's going to repel positive ions back up into the water. And the other ring, which is negatively charged, is going to attract positively charged ions, and it's going to repel negatively charged ions. So what happens is eventually this bucket becomes more and more negative, this bucket becomes more and more positive, and once that difference in charge becomes great enough, we can get a spark from one bucket to the other. So, why does the stream of water spread apart right before there's an arc? Well, as the stream of water is falling through the positively charged ring into the negative bucket, that stream of water becomes more and more negative. eventually to the point where it starts to repel itself and it breaks apart into a spray. As soon as there's a spark, the charge has been reduced and the stream of water comes back together and falls into the bucket as a stream, and then the whole cycle repeats itself. On the other bucket, the opposite thing happens, where the stream becomes more and more positive and then starts to spread apart right before the arc.